What are we starting with, the Mozart?
Give us a bar. so much for letting me play with you. Thank you, musicians. I want you to know that they were playing some of Bab's favorite music. And I was told that, and they accommodated us, and we thank you very much for starting this off so beautifully. You can slip away as you see fit. I'm going to stand right here. My name is Rodney Pierce, and the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, for those whose chairs are situated so you're looking at the center of the room, you don't have a thing to do. But if you're not looking at the center of the room, would you shift your chairs so you see me front or back? Quakers in their worship service are peculiar in that we like to be in the round if we can. So we're not really having anybody in authority in front of us. We are all in authority in a circle. So this is sort of help us do this. Quakers memorial services have a long history, and I will share a little bit of that with you. It is held just like our reading for religious worship. We have no preacher, we have no program set up. We meet in silence, and we wait for the Spirit to speak to us. And if it is so compelling that we feel we have a message, then we stand up and deliver it. And this is the way we would like you to feel today. A memorial service is very special because in this sense, you are here as I am because we knew Babs. Most of you knew her for a long time. And we try to bring Babs back to us by sharing memories. If you feel after the silence has begun that you would like to share a memory, if you would please stand or raise your hand, and a person who has a mic will come and bring it to you. If you can speak while remaining standing, that would be preferable, but you don't have to stand because for some it may be uncomfortable to do so. When a person has passed on, we read an obit in the newspaper, and we find out in various ways that they have left us. And most often, some type of adjective is appended to them, like scientist, like car salesman, teacher, you name it. But Quakers believe that is not enough. We are not what our labels say. We are more than that. And so that we know that if you share with us, I came in here knowing Babs in a certain way, you came in knowing Babs in another way. And believe me, when this service is over, we will leave this room all knowing Babs in a much greater way. It is beautiful that way. Babs was not just a teacher, not just a scientist, but the foundation that was Babs was human being. She was a human being par excellence. And you will share that humanness with us today. So we will enter the silence. If you feel need to say something, please do so. Because there are so many of us here, brevity probably is wise. And the other thing that helps the service is that after someone has spoke, perhaps don't request to speak so soon. Let us savor what has been said. We're pleased that you are here. We will now enter into the silence.
Uh, I'm Ethan. I'm Babs' son, also Camille's. Babs was my mom. For a long time, she was my mom's partner, and then my mom's life partner, and then eventually my mom's legal wife. But no matter her descriptive title or legal title, she was always my mom. I could tell a lot of stories about her growing up. She and Camille, so weird to say, often conspire to bring me joy, like their many birthday schemes, including one was elaborated by riddles and brain teasers that arrived in the mail week over week, and ultimately, yeah, it's a very sensitive mic, sorry, ultimately pointed to a showing of the musical Cats in Toronto after I solved all the riddles. It was pretty cool. In fact, there were ultimately many excursions for theater, including Rent and Angels in America. I saw both of those on Broadway. It's incredible. I could tell you about the time we had a pillow fight in my uncle's basement on Prince Edward Island. I remember that because there's actually a picture of that. She's got me kind of cornered. Or many times that she allowed me to play her rock music that I was into, like Rush or Pink Floyd or The Doors. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was 15 at one time, just like anyone. She enjoyed that. She brought computers and electronics and DIY, like Heath kits, into our lives, and woodworking and carpentry into our house. I could talk about her general love for science and technology, or for justice and equality, or for art and wonder. These are all precious memories and gifts and huge, huge influences on me. But the way I prefer to really frame a musing of her life is to say that even prior to her passing, in our family, we've adopted and continue to employ a phrase, be like Bubby. That was her grandma name, Bubby. So what do we mean when we say that? Or sometimes when we frame it as a question, what would Bubby do? What are those qualities? I mean, my sister put together this really incredible word cloud. You'll see some of these terms in there. I wanted to focus on just 4. Babs was an amazing listener. To be like Bubby is to really hear what somebody is saying, not just the words. So much so was this the case, in fact, that it wasn't really easy to get Babs to talk about herself, certainly. Lungfish, yeah, but not herself. She had a way of turning any conversation about her around. Very quickly, you found yourself the subject of her inquiry, despite your best efforts. Bubby was immensely curious, very complimentary to being a good listener, of course, and an accomplished scientist. I feel life learner is absolutely insufficient to capture her scope of intensity or interest. Insatiable would be a better description. It's not to say that she personally plumbed the depths of every subject that crossed her path so much. She had specific interests, certainly. I think I mentioned lungfish. Still, her knowledge base was pretty wide and in some places quite deep, and the things she didn't know anything about, she did want to know about. Our Babs was remarkably patient as well. You can see that reflected in that listening quality, but where I think it's most evident was in her activism. You have to play a long game. It's super easy to get caught up in the battles and lose sight of the war, but she never did. Accomplishments and setbacks alike were accepted, celebrated, or mourned over, sure, but also noted and then move on to the next. Finally, Bubby was also a paragon of kindness. I never knew her to raise her voice, really, other than at marches and protests. or to utter more than the most mild of epithets, even though there were people who deserved her ire. Despite the hate that she was so often fighting against in reproductive rights and LGBTQT rights, she never fell prey to the temptation to be angry or to harden her heart. So ultimately, the quality I feel best sums up all these adjectives in Babs herself is equanimity. She could see beyond judgment and self-interest. She was deliberate, not reactive. She could hold injustice in her heart, but keep her mind steady and still. She could express great things with small gestures. She could work for change and at the same time bear witness. She had poise, she had grace, she had persistence. We miss her every day, but as she would want, we turn that ache into inspiration.
Good morning. I'm Tara, Camille and Babs's daughter, one of two. Ethan did a fabulous job of summing up many of our thoughts about Babs. Long before I asked any of you to provide single words to summarize Babs, I had made up my own list, which now seem insignificant in some sense because Ethan spoke many of them and you can read them all on your word cloud. Thank you for all of the words that you all submitted. These are the words that I wrote months ago when I contemplated this day as I think of Babs. Calm, extrovert, joyful, interesting, interested, generous, active, intelligent, beautiful, tall, used to be taller, kind, helpful, pleasant, thoughtful, forgiving, committed, and curious.
I loved Babs. She was an amazing human being in so many ways. And I want to tell you my favorite story about Babs. In 2006, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And Babs had already gone through double mastectomy and cancer. And she was my go-to person for science. She was my go-to person for vitamin supplements. She was my go-to person for all of it. She was encouraging, and she gave me courage. But the thing she did that gave me the most courage was this, and it wasn't an event that I participated in. I just heard about it. When she knew that she was had decided to go through chemo, and she knew she would lose her hair, she had a head shaving party, according to sources that I have heard. And they dyed her hair purple, and they had poisonously rich desserts, and they had this big party. This is the story I've heard. And then they had a head shaving party. And I was facing losing all my hair. And that story about Babs taking something that was so frightening and so scary and turning it into a celebration and taking it into her own hands gave me courage. Now, before that, when my son was about 4 years old, my husband took him shopping, bought me this dress and this hat. I have never had the courage to wear this hat, although I love the way I look in it. And so in honor of Babs, and to recognize the fact that all of you were probably encouraged by her in some way, I wear the hat. Oh, no, 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 I'm just trying to hand it my back.
Oh, thank you. Ooh, scared me. I met Babs 41 years ago when she fell in love with Camille. I can't think of Babs without saying Babs and Camille, Babs and Camille, Babs and Camille. I mean, it just goes like a poem. Babs was married. Camille was married with children. My partner was married with children. I moved here to be with my beloved, Jimmy Gilliam. It was kind of odd in the late 70s, early 80s to be out. In fact, when I moved here, my partner who passed away 6 years ago, you might know her, Jimmy Gilliam, her husband, ex-husband of 10 years, took us through a grueling experience of child custody, and it was crazy. So when I met Babs and Camille, and they knew us as a couple, they kind of sought us out, and Babs said, "I'm in love with a woman." And we became a tribe. We became a family. We often went to Bryan Street, Camille's house, and Babs had a house in Williamsville, and we often went there. Babs had such a quiet presence. I often felt when I was with Babs, I was with Jimmy, because they had such a quiet, graceful, open stance about them, in their bodies, in their spirits, in their hearts. If I could call Babs a name, it would be a poet, a poem. Her life just exuded a soft, gentle, rhythmic poem. And Babs and Camille were such a compliment to each other, just like Jimmy and I, because Jimmy and I I'm from New York, Jimmy was from North Carolina, Southern. At our wedding, one in Canada, one in Buffalo, someone said, Jimmy's Mosey and Jerry's Moxie. And Babs and Camille had this energy that just was a perfect balance, like a seesaw. I just want to say that I love Babs, I love Camille. When I think of Jimmy, I think of Babs. Of course, I think of Camille, because I know what it feels like to lose your beloved and your partner, your coach, your mentor, your teammate, your beloved, your soulmate. And I'm always here for Camille, always, 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 and her family. I remember Ethan when he was little, and I gave him some cool records I wish I had back now, but it's okay, you can keep them. But that was like 35 years ago. It was a long, long time ago. And I just want to say to Camille and her family and all her friends, there's nothing like memory. Memory, if we embrace it and embody it, it just keeps us whole and very present with that spirit. Babs, like Jimmy, will always be around us and always access us. I had a call yesterday from a friend I haven't heard from in a couple of years. She said, Jerry, she's from New York City. I said, yeah, oh, Stephanie, hi. She said, Jimmy woke me up and she said to call you. She said something about a halo. So I just invite you, Camille, to just always be open for those special ways that Babs is going to communicate with you through us, through your family, through the spirit, through the seasons. And you're so loved. And please always reach out to us because you embody Babs. And when you reach out to us, we'll experience Babs as well. So I love you.
I had the honor to meet Babs and Camille in 1994 when they came and did safe space training for educators in the city of Buffalo. Now, that may not seem like so long ago, 27 years, but the reality is it was light years away from where we are now. Babs and Camille put themselves out there to be role models for not just LGBTQ youth, but also for educators. Babs had the heart of a teacher, and in the heart of a teacher lies passion. And I can say that I experienced her passion. I saw how she approached her way of training teachers and administrators, and back then there was a lot of pushback and adversity to doing that kind of work. But I just want to say that as we are now, part of the legacy, and there's so much legacy, is that there are adults and there are young people that are alive today because of that passion that Babs put into teaching and being present and training all of the different teachers and community members to be accepting and to understand. And personally, I'm very grateful for everything you did for me as an educator and everyone in the schools. Thank you.
I met Babs when I was probably in my early 30s. And it didn't take me long to do the math and figure out that if she had had a kid when she was pretty young, she could have been my mother. I must have sensed that bottomless well of support that she showed for everybody. And then I turned 35 and I remember saying to her, Babs, I'm old enough to run for president. And she says, go for it. And so now I think if she were here and I said, Babs, I'm thinking of becoming a neurosurgeon. She would say, go for it, you know? And there was that spirit Rodney spoke about, that I get that Quaker thing that you wait for the spirit to come down. I always felt in Babs's presence that that spirit was there. For me, I know everybody felt it for themselves. And I just want to say how grateful I was to have that experience, to have Babs in my life, and how especially grateful I am that you grandchildren get to carry that on.
Susan and I met Babs through a wonderful mutual friend who was the poet Bonnie Johnson. And the friendship developed and matured over many, many years through particularly the Pro-Choice Network, the Voter ID Project, and most particularly Ladies of the Lake. And in our household, we called Babs the Quaker Saint, which was 2 words, so we couldn't contribute it for the cloud. But we did have another word we used when Babs, which was most of the time, was being Babs and showing all of the qualities that people have been talking about today. And that word we could contribute, and it is Babsian.
Hi. I wasn't going to speak today because I do have a tendency to babble sometimes. But I'm not sure how long I've known Babs and Camille, but I met them when they started to be co-editors with me, and actually Jimmy and Jerry at the time too, for Earth Daughters literary magazine. And we used to meet once a month. When, after about 5 years, I think, they withdrew from working with us and were busy with other things, I always thought, well, now we'll just have to make appointments to see each other, because we're not going to see each other once a month. And once Babel came along, although in between there we did run into each other often on Elmwood Avenue, or maybe sit and have some coffee if we ran into each other at Cafe Aroma. Once Babel showed up, I would see them there at the reception. In fact, I posted on the, whatever it is, online, 2 photographs that I took of them during 2 different Babels. And despite my tendency to babble, sorry for the pun, but Babs never acted like I was irritating her, which is surprising, because I probably was irritating. But she was just the most wonderful listener, so kind, so receptive. And it wasn't just that she was listening. She would say things that I realized that she was listening and heard what I said. And I always thought, well, there'll be time. We'll go out and meet for coffee again, all of us. Or even though I had been invited to dinner when they were living out in the suburbs on more than one occasion, even though I had been at their wedding. But then the meetups for coffee didn't quite happen. So I'm saying to you, don't wait. Make your appointments. And Babs, we miss you, and we love you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Ed. It was only since Bab's death that I learned so much about her scientific research and academic background. I met her and Camille in the late 1980s, 1988, and there was an intense period then of political action around, well, It was the end of the Reagan administration and the beginning of the George H.W. Bush administration, and we thought that was as far right as we were going to ever move. We learned, unfortunately, that that wasn't the case, but people hit the streets, and I'm the director of Hall Walls. Ron Emke and I started a biannual, we called it then Gay and Lesbian Arts Festival. And, but I met really Babs and Camille in the street. So first, it was demonstrating sort of that was the very beginning of the culture wars, what we call in the art field the culture wars, where they attacked gay and lesbian, and now we would say we would include everyone and say LGBTQ plus people. They were all being attacked, of course, and they formed, both Camille and Babs were part of started out as a street theater performance group. So that's really how I first remember them, is as street theater performance artists. And they would come to demonstrations. It was called the Ladies of the Lake. And there may be a few members of that group here besides Camille who were part of that, and we've lost some, like Bernadette Hoppy. Bernadette Hoppy was a big part of that group. And first I saw them in street demonstrations, and it was great because they were a satirical group, and they adopted the personae of Republican church ladies, and each had a character and a name, and they dressed like sort of like a Midwestern evangelical church lady group. And their approach to criticizing those administrations was satirical. They would really get into character, and it would show, of course, the ridiculousness of the anti-tolerance of those groups. And then it got even more intense in the early 90s when Operation Rescue came to town, and all the activism in Buffalo for that intense spring was about defending the clinics. And Babs was one of the leaders of the clinic defenders. And so I really got to know them really in the streets around those demonstrations in basically 1988 to 1992. But eventually, Ladies of the Lake also performed in our festival at Hall Walls on stage, and they were hilarious. And a lot of that is, it was mostly people who were not performance artists in real life. Maybe there were a few actors, but it was mostly non-actors. But they did a great job acting and performing these satirical sketches and really inhabiting those horrible characters, but it was really funny. And then the fierceness of the defense of the clinics when Buffalo was visited, let's say, by Operation Rescue. And they were always there on the front lines. I think that we were victorious then. Obviously, there's been some setbacks since, and I don't think that we can think that any of those gains were lost, but what we've learned in the past several years is that the fight goes on, and there's going to always need to be people in the streets. And I'm sure that I just was texting with my family in the small town where some of my family members live this morning. The public library that I used to go to as a little kid had scheduled a drag queen storyteller and in the public library for Pride Month, and it was great. It sounds great to me. Like it was something I would not have expected from my town's public library, but they did it, and counter-protesters came out. I just got this news from family members on text today, and but then the news was, and my brother is out there, and he lives in that town, that counter-protesters came out against the homophobic protesters, and at first they outnumbered the anti-gay protesters 6-1, and now it's 8-1. So people are coming out in the streets in this little town, pretty conservative town, to support the library's decision to schedule this programming at the public library. And I just think that that's where the fight continues. And I know that you know, if Babs and Camille were in that town, they would have come out and been in that counter-protest, and I'm glad my brother's there now. And I think I've inspired them a little bit remotely to get involved in something like that, which wouldn't be in their nature, but that's how I remember Babs performing in Ladies of the Lake, leading the clinic defense, and also their generous support of the arts from that time on, and of Hall Walls. So I really miss Babs a lot.
Good morning. I met Babs in 2002 when she became a member of the Hope Chest Dragon Boat team, and we were teammates. And she was great. I mean, she would come to the exercise classes. She never came in any kind of spandex or tank top or whatever. She always had her jeans on, but she always did every one of those exercises and never complained, did what she could, and to look at her doing those exercises really inspired the rest of the team to continue exercising too. But the fun part was when we would be in the boat. And she was the oldest. When she was the oldest on the team, we would do a birthday paddle. So you had to paddle the same number of strokes that the person's birthday was. And of course, she was in July, so of course we would be on the water in July, and we would have to paddle the birthday paddle for her. 70, 75, 80. Then a couple years ago, I got an email from Camille, and she asked if she could bring Babs down to do a ride, go for a ride in the boat. Well, it also coincided with her 90th birthday. So I said, sure, bring her down. We'll get her in the boat. And so they came down, and I don't even think she told Babs she was going to go for a ride on the boat that day, but they showed up at the marina, and we were ready for Babs. And she was so thrilled to be able to get in the boat, but she didn't realize we also had a huge party for her afterwards. But we did the 90 birthday paddles. We counted them out, each one. Everybody had to count. And then at the end, of course, we sang the birthday song. But Babs was just thrilled. She did do a little of the paddling. She didn't do all 90, but she was in the boat, and we were really grateful that Camille had brought her down, because the women who didn't know Babs at the time, because she hadn't been participating in those recent years, got a chance to meet her and know her, and she treated everybody like they were her teammate for life and had already known them. So that's the fun story I have about Babs.
I don't really remember when I met Babs and Camille. I know it was a long time ago, but I have these moments in time. And the first moment in time is when we were doing a workshop where we were taught to create moments or stories for sharing why marriage equality is important. And I can remember Camille had a great story. And then the most recent one was Babs contacted me to see if I wanted a singing bowl. She had the singing bowl she didn't need anymore, and she asked me if I could use it. I have no idea why she thought of me for that, but I am grateful for that. I am grateful for the moments in time and the energy that we share with everybody in all of this is what really makes life worthwhile. So thank you.
My name is Tony. I don't remember either when the first time was, and Ricky got me to thinking, well, when was the last? And I think that many of us may have the same last time seeing Babs, because it was during the pandemic, and it was when Babs and Camille showed up at my door with a COVID mask, a rainbow COVID mask, which Camille presented to me at the end of a fishing pole for social distancing. And Javier and I are a bit startled to hear that the family says, "What would Babs do?" Because we do that. But we always do, what would Babs Conant do? I don't know, I always use both Babs Conant. I never call her Babs Conant. They go together. I always gave her both names. But because she was so consummately sensible, and I should have contributed the word sensible. Smart, yes, everybody, but sensible. And I knew her, well, I never went to the theater with her. I didn't know that she had this passion, which I have as well. How is that possible? We probably talked about it, but I just assume everyone is passionate about that. And I'm not related to her, but I also knew her as a neighbor. And I can remember very distinctly my very first meeting of the Lindward Preservation Group, which is a fierce group. And at the first meeting, they had actually had this little group that went around the neighborhood with a clipboard, writing down, because there's nothing more delicious than to find out what someone else has done wrong, but they documented all of the code violations for our neighbors. You know, who had a crack in the sidewalk, who had snuck in vinyl windows in the middle of the night, who, all of that. And so they documented how many violations there had been, and it was quite an impressive presentation at the end of it. And he said, well, now should we go, because we're trying to grow the membership, should we go and should we tell these people that they have these violations? And Babs said, no, we are not going to do that. Which is kind of the end of the story, but then she explained that no, your first interaction with the neighborhood association, we should be giving people something. We should be doing something for people. We should not be shaming them. And I just thought, this is a fabulous human being. I still think so.
My name is Richard Griffin, and I've found in this venue that I did better without the mic. But if you think you can't hear me or understand, please raise your hand and I will use technology. Back. Okay. I've switched. Thank you. Dr. Jane Griffin and I live at 60 Oakland, where we've lived for 17 years. Several years ago, Camille and Babs acquired the house, which is right next to ours. And we both have wonderful front yards and opportunities to communicate and do things like save the New York Times over the weekend if somebody's away. But in any event, the first time that I met Babs, she was in the middle of her lawn, on her knees, picking up debris or bad bugs or whatever else. So over the years, we progressed. I remember I've been involved in trying to raise money for different organizations over the years. And Babs and I had some very interesting conversations about that. She was so generous. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. On behalf of both Jane and I, we express our great appreciation and thankfulness for the life of Babs.
Hello, I am Susan. Even though she was a Quaker saint, and she was thoroughly Babsian, one of the most Babsian things was her sense of humor. Throughout the over 30 years I've known Babs, she could always be counted on to tell the corniest jokes and the worst puns you had ever heard. I loved it. I learned some good ones from her. Even though she was a serious academic and passionate advocate, she could be silly. From the times we were performing and she was Dr. Edwina Smythe Featheringstone, making fun of her own academic world and tying it to creationism, to the very last days of her life when we saw her for the last time. Camille, you remember, we came over and we laughed with her and we sang some songs from The Lady at the Lake, and she tried to sing along as best as she could, and she laughed. She laughed till the end.
The first word that I think of when I think of Babs is presence. She had presence. She was present. She knew how to be present for everyone that she interacted with. And in my life, she was present before I even met her because of my roommate at the time. Well, actually, before we were roommates, we were in high school together. And she spoke of this amazing woman named Babs and kind of looked at me with pity that I had not yet met her. And so it was it took a couple of years, and I did meet her. And then she became a different kind of presence, a bodily presence. She showed up at a peace protest that I was involved with in my early unsuccessful college days. And I remember looking at her thinking, it's like a grown-up. It's a real person that came to our protest. And it was incredible. And it empowered me and made me think, what we're doing really is important, because this really important woman came and showed us by her presence that what we were doing was worth a while in a different way than we had felt maybe before. She remained present through my interactions with her through Quaker meeting, and I remember her going to actually see her at a comedy club, doing her Dr. Edwina. She took it on the road, and that was hilarious. I think that another word for presence is love. She had that in such abundance. And she shared it with everybody that she met and many people she had not met. And it wasn't just love in the abstract. It was a present love, which takes time and energy, money. And she always was consistent with those things in order to be present. She was also, it wasn't just that kind of love. She was really a romantic. And one of my favorite memories of her was when she was telling me about meeting Camille, how it changed her life, how much she loved her, how much, if you feel love in your life, you should go for it. Decide that that was important and go for it, and look what it did for her. And she was smiling and laughing, and I think that is a lot of what fueled her ability in the second half of her life to be a loving presence, because she had a loving presence. And they were there and they were that for each other. So she started out in my life as a presence without having met her. She will now continue to be a presence in my life, even though she isn't physically present. And I believe that she will be present for all of us in many different ways, through each other, as we show each other the love that she showed us. And as will we show that love and support to the love of her life, Camille. Thanks for sharing, Camille. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we love you.
I'm not going to speak about Babs because you've all done it very well. And she's here anyway. So. But I do want to bring this to an end so we can eat what we've been smelling. And she was really remarkable. And one of the things that was remarkable is that she really questioned her own beliefs and sought to understand what they were and then to express it. And so she wrote things, and this is in your program. She wrote a little text about the Lord's Prayer, and she made some changes. And this is what I want to end with. And if I'm going to read it, and if you want to say it with me, that would be fine. You're welcome. And I'm turning because I need the light. So she wrote, Father, Mother, Spirit, Child, be hallowed in me. Let harmony flow through our lives. Let justice and mercy be proclaimed by our lives. Nourish us each day with love, both given and received, and forgive us our unloving. Help us to know our own dark side and to understand the shadow in others. Lead us out of arrogance and separation, for in vulnerability we will know love, which is to know life, and we would live in the light. Amen. And the Quakers end by shaking hands.